Maternity and sexuality don't often find themselves intertwined in the same narrative in 18th century French and Francophone literature, and when they do, their combination is often employed as a tool for villainizing women. My research instead regards sexuality as a liberatory force for mothers and their daughters. In this presentation, I will discuss two 18th century literary texts that depict the combination of maternity and sexuality through the mother-daughter bond. I will demonstrate how the mothers within these texts manipulate the Enlightenment notion of mothers as educators to create a space of shared sexuality with their daughters, and how this space is a force of resistance against patriarchal constructions of womanhood and motherhood in the 18th century. The two texts that I am discussing are Antoine Bray and Claude Villaret's La Belle Allemande, and an anonymous Creole poem found in Moreau de son Mary's Notes Historiques, which Deborah Jensen titles Zabette in her book Beyond the Slave Narrative. Both of the mothers in these texts teach their daughters how to make a living as a courtesan, a lifestyle which offers them more control of their finances and their bodies than marriage or other forms of work available to women by maintaining control of their choice of suitors who pay for their company and sexual favors. It is within this dynamic of teaching that these mothers actively subscribe to the 18th century role of mothers as educators. Many writings about motherhood in the 18th century emphasize the importance of teaching children. From educational treatises to epistolary novels to medical essays, no matter where you look, the dominant discourse of good motherhood during the Enlightenment was heavily focused on education and a mother's devotion to teaching her children, especially her daughters. The mothers in La Belle Allemande and Zabette demonstrate this commitment. At the beginning of La Belle Allemande, the main character Thérèse pays tribute to her mother's dedication to teaching her, stating, quote, "As I owe all my virtues and all the glory I currently enjoy to the care of my mother for my education, I would be guilty of a dreadful ingratitude if, by my negligence to make her known, I deprived her of the praises due to her talents and her experience." End quote. Thérèse's gratitude stems from the freedom of the courtesan lifestyle taught to her by her mother. In Zabette, we can assume from the narrator's use of Creole and her emphasis on making whites pay that both women are free black or mulatto courtesans in Saint-Domingue, the location of Notes Historiques by Moreau. And although there is no indication in this poem that the narrator is Zabette's biological mother, Moreau's impression that courtesan women of color in Saint-Domingue, quote, could make a better life for themselves and their children through their libertine commerce with whites, end quote, leads us to consider how these mothers might have taught their daughters how to use their sexuality to live more freely within these colonized spaces, as the courtesan narrator teaches Zabette. Like Thérèse's mother, the narrator guides the young Zabette with knowledge gained through her own experience, and this relationship presents a mother-daughter dynamic similar to the one that we see in La Belle Allemande. For instance, the narrator states, quote, "How do you expect to gain status if you don't make money? They will say Zabette is an idiot who doesn't know how to make whites pay. Roll like me, my dear, you will have everything you want," end quote. In the two short excerpts that I've shared, we can see the instrumentalization of the maternal role of educating daughters to establish a space of shared sexuality. I use the term sexuality as Katherine Johnson defines it in the introduction of Sexuality, a Psychosocial Manifesto. She asserts that, quote, "The term sexuality can refer to a set of practices or behaviors, a range of feelings or affects, or as a way of categorizing people on the basis of their sexual orientation, sexual identity, or political allegiances," end quote. I consider the mothers and daughters within these texts to share a set of practices, behaviors, and feelings based on their professions as courtesans. The men in their lives have little to do with their sexuality outside of their ability to provide financial gain, and the mothers and daughters are linked through a space of shared sexuality that relies on romantic apathy toward their suitors and maintains standards and behaviors which protect these women from the dangers of fleeting romance or marital dependence. Within this space, the mothers and daughters are actively resisting patriarchal conceptions of womanhood and motherhood in the 18th century. As Elizabeth Badinter explains in Mother Love, Enlightenment authors such as Rousseau perpetuated ideas of feminine fragility and maternal sacrifice in their writings, depicting woman in such a way that, quote, "her essence, her purpose, and her function are dependent on man. Such a woman would be totally prepared for her role as mother, living through and for her child," end quote. The mothers in La Belle Allemande and Zabette do not live through or for their daughters, but with them, sharing a courtesan lifestyle and guiding them towards a feminine existence more liberating than that which is available through marriage. Their dependence on men only goes so far as his purse goes deep, and once their suitors' payments run out, the courtesan is free to take on other lovers who meet her financial standards. In Zabette, the mother narrator is simultaneously resisting patriarchal and racial oppression. She is attaining financial independence as a free woman of color through the money of her white oppressors without risking the social or legal consequences of interracial relationships. Through this space of shared sexuality, these mothers are resisting the patriarchal and colonial institutions which sought to subjugate them by manipulating the role of mother as educator that these societies imposed upon them to begin with.